Want climate news in your inbox? Sign up here for Climate Forward, our email newsletter. President Sebastián Piñera of Chile said on Wednesday that his country, which has been rocked by a wave of recent protests, was not in a position to host a key United Nations climate change meeting and a major Asia-Pacific trade summit later this year. The announcements underscored how destabilizing the recent wave of protests and acts of vandalism have been for the country, which has long been regarded as an exemplar of stability in a tumultuous region. In a speech at the presidential palace on Wednesday morning, Mr. Piñera cited the difficult circumstances that our country has experienced to explain why Chile would not be able to host the events. Our first priority as a government is to focus first and foremost on fully restoring public order and social peace, he added. Canceling the climate meeting, which had been scheduled for December, leaves organizers with a very tight window to find a new venue. Chile stepped up to host the climate change conference after the initial host, Brazil, pulled out last year. Brazil's decision came soon after the election of President Jair Bolsonaro, who does not regard climate change as a dire threat to humanity. Patricia Espinosa, head of the United Nations Climate Change Agency in Bonn, said her office had heard from Chile's government shortly before the news conference at the presidential palace in Santiago. We are currently exploring alternative hosting options, she said in a statement. Her office said this was the first time in the quarter-century of United Nations-sponsored climate negotiations that a host country had cancelled so close to the event. The office was weighing whether the meeting could be held elsewhere in December or whether it would have to be postponed until January. The trade meeting, of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group, had been scheduled for mid-November. That cancellation throws a wrench into trade talks between the United States and China. President Trump had been scheduled to attend the trade meeting, which was seen as an opportunity for the two economic giants to settle a months-long fight over tariffs that has rippled across the global economy. The turmoil in Chile, which began October 18, with protests over a modest hike in the Santiago subway fare, has spiraled into violent clashes between security forces and demonstrators. Looting and arson soon spread across the capital, prompting Mr. Piñera to declare a state of emergency and ask the armed forces to restore order. That step did not diffuse the tension. Chileans continued to take to the streets in large numbers, and the protests turned into a broader moment of reckoning over what protesters called the country's entrenched inequality and an economic model that has kept pensions and wages low as the cost of utilities and other everyday expenses have risen. In response, Mr. Piñera put forward a reform package that includes higher taxes for the rich and a series of wealth redistribution policies. On Monday, he sacked several ministers as he sought to convince Chileans that the government was taking their grievances seriously. The scenes of mayhem in Chile in recent weeks are strikingly at odds with the image the country has painstakingly built over the years. Since Chile's 19-year dictatorship ended in 1990, the country has experienced steady economic growth, which has made its citizens among the most prosperous in South America. Its democracy is regarded as among the most resilient in the region. For more news on climate and the environment, follow @NYT Climate on Twitter.